Imagine a scenario so baffling, so counterintuitive, it challenges our very understanding of justice. An innocent person, under no physical duress, confesses to a crime they did not commit. How can this be? Welcome. Today we delve into a profound and often unsettling corner of our justice system, the false confession. This isn't just a rare mistake, it's a significant flaw, an admission of guilt for a crime an individual absolutely did not commit, and it frequently leads to tragic wrongful convictions. For years, it seemed illogical, almost impossible to comprehend. But extensive research has now unveiled the complex psychological and systemic factors that weave together to create this devastating phenomenon. False confessions are not a thing of the past. They remain a deeply concerning issue, impacting countless lives. Organizations like the Innocence Project and the National Registry of Exonerations tell us a stark truth. False confessions account for nearly 30% of DNA exonerations and 27% of all homicide exonerations. Cases like the Exonerated Five, formerly known as the Central Park Five, and more recently the Norfolk Four or the Beatrice Six, continuously remind us of the enduring relevance and the tragic, lifelong consequences these events carry. To truly understand false confessions, we first need to recognize their different forms. Experts have identified three main types, each with its own motivations and contributing factors. The first is a voluntary false confession. This occurs without any direct police pressure. Why would someone do this? Well, motivations can range from a desire to protect another person to seeking notoriety in high-profile cases. Think of John Mark Carr's false confession in the JonBenet Ramsey case. Sometimes underlying psychological or psychiatric disorders can also play a significant role. Next, we have coerced-compliant false confessions. In these instances, individuals confess knowing full well they are innocent. This often happens due to intense interrogation tactics, an overwhelming desire to escape the sheer stress and pressure of questioning, or even a misguided belief that confessing will lead to leniency or a quicker release. These confessions are typically recanted very quickly once the pressure is off. Finally, and perhaps the most complex, are coerced-internalized or persuaded false confessions. Here, an innocent person, subjected to deceptive interrogation techniques and misleading claims about evidence, actually comes to genuinely believe they committed the crime. They might even fabricate false memories to fit the narrative. This type is particularly insidious, often affecting individuals who lack strong self-confidence or have poor memory. It's crucial to acknowledge that certain populations are disproportionately susceptible to these pressures. Juveniles, for instance, are highly vulnerable. So too are individuals with intellectual disabilities, mental health challenges, or low intelligence. High suggestibility, which can actually be measured, and language barriers are also significant risk factors, making someone more likely to internalize false information or succumb to pressure. So, what are these intense interrogation tactics we're talking about? Research has clearly linked specific police methods to false confessions.
These include prolonged custody or interrogation, often stretching beyond 16 hours in documented false confession cases, isolation from familiar support systems, the use of minimization, where interrogators imply leniency, or maximization, where they exaggerate the crime's severity, explicit or even implied promises of leniency, or conversely, threats, can be powerfully coercive. Perhaps most controversially is the false evidence ploy, where interrogators lie about having evidence, such as fake DNA results or a non-existent eyewitness. Sleep deprivation also plays a role in eroding a suspect's resistance. Many of these strategies are core components of the Reid technique, a widely recognized interrogation method. The impact of a confession, even a false one, is profound. Once a confession is made, it becomes exceptionally powerful evidence in the eyes of the law, often overshadowing all other aspects of a trial. This potent influence contributes significantly to wrongful convictions. While legal challenges to voluntariness are common in pretrial motions and appeals, they are often an uphill battle. Behind much of our understanding of this topic are dedicated researchers like Dr. Saul Kassin, a social psychologist who developed the taxonomy of false confessions, and organizations like the Innocence Project, which leads the charge in exonerations and advocating for reforms. Their work, alongside others, illuminates the dark corners of the system and highlight critical cases such as the Exonerated Five, the Norfolk Four, and the Beatrice Six, where groups of individuals were coerced into confessing to crimes they didn't commit. The issue of false confessions isn't just about understanding the past, it's about confronting ongoing controversies and driving future reforms. One of the most significant debates centers on the legitimacy of deceptive interrogation tactics, particularly the false evidence ploy. The United States is an outlier in allowing police to lie about evidence, a practice that is prohibited or heavily restricted in many other developed nations, including England, France, Germany, and Japan. Critics argue these methods are not only unethical, but directly undermine public trust and are a primary cause of false confessions. Another persistent challenge is what we might call the common sense belief in the infallibility of confessions. Despite overwhelming evidence that innocent people do confess, many within the public and even the legal system find it incredibly difficult to believe. This makes it challenging for juries to discount a confession, even when other evidence contradicts it, and it can influence prosecutors towards harsher charges, believing they have an airtight case. The disproportionate impact of coercive interrogation on vulnerable populations, like juveniles and individuals with mental or intellectual disabilities, raises serious ethical questions about due process and fair treatment. How can we ensure a fair process when those least equipped to resist pressure are most likely to succumb? Thankfully, there's a strong push for meaningful reforms. One widely advocated reform is mandatory electronic recording of interrogations. This creates transparency and an objective record, though there's still debate over whether to record the entire process or just the final confession. There are also strong calls to ban or limit police deception, especially when interrogating juveniles.
Limiting interrogation duration is another key proposal, with suggestions to set strict limits, perhaps deeming confessions inadmissible after, say, 6 or 12 hours. Furthermore, allowing expert testimony in court could educate juries about the psychology of false confessions, and implementing pretrial reliability hearings for confessions could give judges more power to scrutinize how a confession was obtained. Finally, there's a movement to prohibit the use of unreliable lie detection techniques, like polygraphs, which, despite their unproven accuracy, can still pressure innocent suspects into confessing. We also can't ignore the links between false confessions and broader systemic biases, with non-white suspects potentially facing increased susceptibility to coerced confessions, adding another layer of injustice to this complex issue. So, we've explored the profound phenomenon of false confessions, understanding their types, the tactics that contribute to them, and electronic recording, and the restriction of deceptive tactics, especially for our most vulnerable, signals a clear path forward. These efforts are not just about correcting past wrongs. They are about building a more ethical, evidence-based, and ultimately a more just criminal justice system for everyone. By understanding these complexities, we can better advocate for a system where truth, not coercion, prevails.